You can forget a lot of things, Foster Care Nation, but never forget this. You're listening to Unparalleled Studios.
I signal.
Foster Care Nation, listen up. This is
Foster Care and Unparalleled Journey.
strength for the powerless, courage for the fearful, hope and healing for wounded hearts. Hello, and welcome back to Foster Care, an Unparalleled Journey, with Jason and some people you've never heard of. Okay, guys, let's just start from the obvious beginning here. You haven't heard from me in a while. Our family life has been a little more than crazy. We've had death in the family. We've had life. We've had baptisms. We've had an amazing football season. We've had a soccer season. Our life has just gotten super busy. We currently have, I don't even remember the last episode you guys have heard if I had talked about it yet, but we have a third one in diapers in our house right now. We have a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 6-month-old. Life has just been busy, and I have not had the time to take care of my family properly and edit files and get stuff put up here. So I'm just going to come out from the beginning and say, I am sorry we have just disappeared off the face of the earth and not given you any explanation why, but that's what we have going on. I would love to tell you we're going to be back to regular weekly episodes. I have some in the bank ready to go. Some people have been waiting for their episode to show up for quite a while. And to those people, I apologize as well. We've just been stupid busy. And part of this journey that we've been on is I was asked to write a chapter in a book. I mentioned it here or there. I don't know if you guys have heard it, but I was asked to write a chapter in a book about the grief of child loss from a dad's perspective. And a bunch of guys did. I think there were 7 authors in total. And I believe the book is ready to order. And so I wanted to put this out there so in case any of you, number one, have been through it yourselves. Number 2, would just like to peek in on the journey of some dads who've been through some really hard stuff. Or number 3, and most importantly, if you have a dad in your life who has been through something like this, who you don't know what to say to, you don't know how to handle it, this would be a great way to, number 1, read it yourself and begin to understand some of what they're going through. Or number 2, get a copy and send it to them so that they can understand that they're not alone in this world. So this conversation was with, I believe, 4 of the authors. We set up a time when we could get the most guys together and talk through our journey a little bit, talk through the process of writing a book and a lot of other stuff. So it's kind of a long episode, but I encourage you guys, take the time, listen to it, and learn how maybe you could help someone else in your life who is going through a hard time. So this will come up this week. Hopefully you guys can hear it, and I'm going to work real hard at trying to get back on top of taking care of stuff because the football season is over, which those of you who have ever played Little League football know that means like 3 2-hour practices a week plus a game on the weekend, and soccer season is only a couple 2 or 3 more weeks in the works, and we'll be done with that. So that's, I don't know, a couple hours a week that hopefully will all free up for us a bit, and I'll have a little bit more room to get some things done. Thanks for being patient, guys. And if you're interested, the link will be down in the notes for the webpage where you can get this book. It's at myfriendlincoln.org, but I'll link the specific page in the notes. Hello, and welcome back to Foster Care, an Unparalleled Journey. All right, guys, we've taken a break for a while here on the podcast. As you all have undoubtedly noticed, we've had a lot of craziness in life. I was recently touched base with somebody who hooked me up with a gal by the name of Dolores, and she had a project she wanted to run that involved dads and grief, and the grief of child loss. And I believe that most all of us who are in the foster or adoptive community have dealt with either our own grief of watching kids leave, have dealt with kids who are dealing with grief of their parents or the bio family. Grief is a big topic. And part of what she noticed was the book that she had published before, what I believe was called The Last Kiss, was a book of women's stories, ladies telling their story about their experience of losing a child. And the biggest piece of feedback she had was, I wish there was something for men like this. And so she started to reach out and found some people who had experienced this. And she put together a group of, I think there's 6 of us who have all written our story. And I have 4 of us here today. You've got me, Jason. We've got Mike Pruitt. Mike, how you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
All right. We got Mr. Mark Pearson.
Hey, Jason, everybody. Thanks for having me too.
And we've got Ian Loopy.
Hello, all. Thanks for having me.
Hopefully I pronounced that name correctly, the last name.
You did. Well done.
Good, because you're the only last name I didn't hear you say yourself. but yeah, so we have all sat down and written our story of some serious child loss, grief that we've lived through. And we've been through some rough times together as a group. And we wanted to sit down and talk about our stories just a little bit. The book is going to be coming out here somewhere between summer and the holidays. Unfortunately, there is some shipping issues they have to deal with and some all kinds of different parts and pieces that nobody has direct control over. So we don't exactly know when it will be out. The book is available for pre-order on the site right now. It's at myfriendlincoln.org. And there'll be a link in the show notes to the page where you can pre-order the book. So as soon as it's available, it'll be shipped out to you. I've got a chapter in there. Mike has a chapter. Mark has a chapter. And Ian has a chapter. And so we just wanted to have a quick discussion here today and discuss one of those terribly taboo topics about things that just don't exist, because us guys, we don't have feelings. We're not allowed to. We're supposed to be hard and tough and look like the big bad motorcycle guy, right? And I say that if we just had a conversation about the whole the whole motorcycle community thing, and we just don't talk about grief. We go through hard stuff in life, and we tuck it away in a little box and we put it in the back of our brain, and we ignore it, and we allow it to fester in the back of our brains. But the truth is it's real, and it affects us greatly. And just in my own story, the way it affected me was I could not handle the fact that I'd actually just lost my dad when my daughter went to the hospital sick, and I never had a chance to truly grieve his loss. And 9 months later, she passed, and my whole family was in turmoil. I never really had a lot of time to process that grief either. The only way I felt like I could stand there and be the stalwart, strong tower of a rock that my family needed was to chase alcohol every night. Because if I killed the feelings with alcohol, then I could survive till the next day. And that works for a very short time. It is a horrible plan, and I do not recommend it for anybody. As of today, I am about a little over 6.5 years since my last drink, but I that was a journey. And it took me a long time to understand what I was doing was just punishing myself for the grief that I felt. And so, guys, how about you guys? Did you have build any vices or step into any negative coping mechanisms that really just took you down the rabbit hole?
I think I did, and it wasn't necessarily that there was a lack of a desire to grieve. It was, going back to the whole dad's thing, not having, not being able to show emotion, but the entirety of my life, I've been a paramedic, and we were taught as young paramedics that there was no emotional attachment into what we did. And so, leading up to Rylan getting sick and getting cancer, I was a textbook expert on how to swallow emotion and never let that emotion come out. I could bury it, never think about it again, and just move on. So I know I did.
Yeah, I think similarly, I was very good at swallowing those emotions and putting them away. And it wasn't until I started this chapter, which was about a year after my son Tannen had passed, that I realized that I'd never really begun to process it. I'd never really begun to grieve. And at that time through the journey, White Claws were tasting good, and it didn't smell like beer when I was in the hospital, so I could get away with it. And suddenly drinking became my only way to feel and my only way to begin processing these emotions. But it quickly became that it was an unhealthy way of doing it, and the emotions I was having were not my own. They were maybe exaggerated or false.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Ian. Mine was a little bit different. And for me, it was more work. While my daughter Brooke was in the hospital, there was a lot of other things happening in our house. My mother-in-law had gotten cancer while my daughter was being treated for cancer. I had to put my dog down, who was only 5 years old, because she had a form of cancer. So I'm automatically going into there's something going on in my house. And my role in my family was I was the medical person, right? Like Mike, you were talking about you're an EMT. I'm not an EMT. I'm a tech guy. I know IT, not EMT. So everything fell on me about what medicine, what this, what that, taking this one to the doctor while trying to deal with my daughter being sick and being in ICU and things going on in the office. I had to keep my medical because they were covering everything. So after she had passed, I basically gave myself 3 weeks and then I went back to work. And not only did I go back to work, my boss, who was delaying his promotion, promoted me to the director now. So now I have 45 people all reporting to me, and I'm dealing with, okay, when the hell am I going to grieve? What is grieving? I don't even know what the hell anything like that is. And that was 2019. A year later, COVID happens. And it wasn't until I started talking about it a little bit more, and a good friend of mine who had lost his daughter to a car accident, that it finally just like settle in and say, listen, dumbass, you need to make some time to grieve. So I'm starting to share more about Brooke and my journey, and I'm honored to be here talking to you guys and to write that chapter in that book. So, but instead of alcohol, it was more of a work thing. Although, mind you, I do drink definitely a bottle of wine when I get a chance to. So I'm right there with you guys on that road.
Yeah. Mark, you brought up an interesting point is, at my job, I spent about 9 months with our daughter being real sick. And I kept telling them, hey, look, I got stuff going on and I don't know when I'm going to need time off. And when we were to the point, because the disease that my daughter was diagnosed with, they had to fly a team into the Children's Hospital here in St. Louis out of Johns Hopkins University just to diagnose it. They had no idea how to work on it. It's something that primarily shows up post-mortem in newborns. They knew nothing about it. So we were sitting on a lot of question marks. And I was just trying to keep my job abreast of where I'm at and what's going on. And at one point, I had one of my bosses looks me dead in the eye and she's like, well, how long are they going to keep doing this? I mean, when is it time to just quit? And I'm, wow. To this day,
That's messed up.
I agree. To this day, I'm still working on figuring out how to forgive that and not come into, not literally, but there's that piece of anger there that makes you go, I understand how workplace violence happens, right? Like stuff like that. I'm curious, how did that affect your jobs? Because for me, it was pretty significant dealing with stuff like that.
I have a sort of similar story to Mark that, so my son was diagnosed July 2020, and I think it was October-ish of 21, we were still fighting. I'm a behavioral specialist, so my job, it requires me to go out in the field and help others with their mental health. And my boss saw what I was doing and actually promoted me and made me director of the company. And it was great. I was able to work from the camper we were living in. We weren't able to live at home because we were too far from the children's hospital. And after a transplant, you have to be so close to the hospital. So we bought a camper. It was great. I had flexibility. But then after he passed, I was met, Mark, with a similar story that I had requested 2 weeks for bereavement and didn't want to come back on a Monday. So asked, could I have an additional 2 days off? And that was not the right question. And I need you back at 100% and ready to go when you do come back. And suddenly just all of that pressure that didn't need to be was flooded, and, never had that opportunity to grieve because these 2 weeks, fly by. And let's be honest, it's not like I took those 2 weeks and sat in a chair. We got lawns to mow and these things to build and things to fix. And I still have 2 other kids that I need to play with and make sure they're not feeling unwanted or less than. And so like you, Jason, yeah, it's hard to not be resentful and angry in those moments, and just another emotion that I don't have good training on dealing with. Maybe my coping skills are appropriate, maybe they're not.
Yeah, that's a good point. I will preface what I was saying before with my job was extremely supportive. They gave me a ton of opportunity to use up all of my time and even then some. And they covered everything for Brooke and all of her care. It was more of, okay, they've done all of this. And the story I had in my head was, okay, I need to give back to them. Instead of, they didn't come to me and say, well, you need to get back to work. That would have been, yeah, like what happened to you, Ian. That's just, I don't know. I probably would have quit my job if they'd said that to me. But at the same token, this is one of those jobs where you don't walk away from because you get so much after like 20 years of service that lasts for the rest of your life. So that was the other thing in the back of my head, on top of everything else. Like you said, Ian, yeah, you got the other kids. I have 2 other biological children that they all grieve in very different ways. I remember I used to get upset because I didn't see my daughter crying. She was just grieving her own way. Right. I don't know if that ever happened to you guys, but when my kids didn't cry when they heard Brooke's favorite song come on, it's just stupid shit. But yeah, it was
our expectations of how they should react. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we were living in a camper and my son passed, and my oldest son was just in the other end of the camper and didn't immediately cry, right? Didn't begin to grieve. He asked what was for breakfast and can he play? Because in his mind, he saw his little brother sleeping there in his mother's arms.
Yeah.
And at that point, we've been battling cancer for 2 years. He didn't know he's just going to go to the hospital for a couple of days. This is just par for the course. But we had that expectation. No, I don't care if you're only 4 or 5 years old. You should be crying. You should be weeping. This should be the worst day of your life. That's what we expected.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Mike, I'm really kind of curious on this for you because I've worked alongside some emergency services guys. My dad was a police officer 20 years ago in a different lifetime. I drove a tow truck, and I've been on the scene of a lot of accidents and seen a lot of the things that humans aren't designed to see. So I know that in your field, you see lots of things like that. And you even mentioned, you're trained to kind of put that stuff in a box and leave it there. How did that play out for you as you're working? I mean, you're still dealing with people in trauma every day of that.
Yeah. So it was Rylan. Rylan had medullomyoblastoma. It was a brain tumor. It was the 51st known case of that one. And the children's hospital that would be local to us wouldn't treat him because they didn't have a contract with our insurance company. So they basically kicked us out and sent us to St. Jude's. So that alluded to his mom basically taking a year of leave off of her job and me working a 48-hour shift on an ambulance. And then on my 4 days off, going up to Memphis to be there with him. I still had to maintain insurance, still had to pay child support, still have life doesn't stop just because cancer exists. So on top of watching my child battle cancer, I got to see everything that paramedics see at work: car crashes, heart attacks, kids dying from SIDS, sick kids, sick people. Just, death was is something that has surrounded my life since I've been in this field, and so I feel like I got sort of a double dose of it. It's worse too when you do know the future and what is probably going to happen. They gave us a 2% chance of survival with this. And that was really clearly demonstrated when we had his end of treatment scans. They found another spot on his spine. They cut the time in half to come back. That was 6 weeks. Rescanned at 6 weeks, and from end of treatment to rescan at 6 weeks, he was covered in cancer from brain to spine. They told us maybe 3 months. He died 6 days later. I was lucky in that I had a huge outpouring amount of support from the first responder community. And that was great up until people forget. No, I don't want to say people forget. People don't know how to talk to a parent or to deal with parents that have lost a child. And that was good up until 6 months after Rylan passed. And I'll never forget the day. It was the last time that I worked full time on an ambulance. I watched a family of 4, including a 6-week-old and 6-year-old, which is how old Rylan was, burn in a car accident. There was nothing we could do. It was engulfed. We couldn't physically get into the car because the flame was so intense. There was nothing left. The rims were melted in half. And I remember calling my wife, who is also a paramedic and has been my rock through all of this, and telling her that I'm done. I just can't do this anymore. You can't watch your own child take his last breath and go to work and expected to not relive that same nightmare every time you go on a call. And we never knew what we were going to get. It could be somebody that has just toenail pain, all the way up to the worst of it. So I was blessed, but I hit that point to where people, again, they didn't forget, but they don't realize that grief is not a singular process. It's multifocal. You can go in and out of grief, and people try to move on with their lives while they expect you to move on with yours. And when I left EMS full time, that disconnect was very obvious at where I was working. They didn't know how to handle somebody that was dealing with this much grief. I didn't know how to handle it either. So, you can't fault them for not knowing how to handle it, especially in our line of work too. But it just, being a paramedic and knowing it just compounded itself and made it 10 times. For me, I feel like it was just 10 times worse than somebody that wouldn't know what you were doing through his entire, battle with cancer. And you were just waking up every day wondering if this was going to be, is this his last day?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a tough moment. I still remember the place I was, the highway I was on. I was going across the Poplar Street Bridge over the Mississippi River when my phone rang and my wife called me and she said, "It's time to go home." And I'm going to tell you, I hit a brick wall. I backed up and I rewinded and relived that moment at least once or twice, because that's one of those things that I just don't think we're wired to handle. We're not wired to do that. And the best way most impactful way I can explain it to people is, once you've laid your hand on your child's casket, you are fundamentally changed for the rest of your life. And it's a true change in who you are. And it's so difficult. And it's all that grief comes in. And we as men aren't supposed to feel the feelings. And we're just known to be the strong guy who stands up and walks through it all. But then that happens, and all of life is still going on around you. The bills are still due. As it turns out, my mortgage company does not give a damn that I'm going through the death of a child. The electric company doesn't care. That you've got to still get up every day. You got to pay the bills. You got to go to work. Yeah. And honestly, I'm a little bit jealous that you guys got like 2 weeks off. I got 1 week and I was right back to work. And I was fortunately, my job, they were trying to push more work on me. They asked me if I would train a guy when I first came back. And my first thought was not no, but hell no. And then I thought, you know what? The best way for me to keep my head in the game right now is to have somebody else here that keeps my mind off of where it's at. And that poor guy, he dealt with the most raw version of me ever. We're still friends to this day. Poor
That must have been scary.
Oh, yeah. He was convinced I was going to murder somebody with a hammer for a while because I was not a healthy human, right? But life still keeps coming at you.
Yeah.
And we were doing all kinds of things. I mean, shortly thereafter, we ended up moving. We bought a house. We changed so much in our life, but we had to keep walking through that. Do you guys, what about your life just continuing to go on through the hard times like that made it so difficult as the grief intertwined with your daily life?
If I could, one little thing that recurs almost daily, and it's Jason, Mike, you guys were just saying it, is people, it's not that they forget, but they just don't know what to say to us. And even while we were going through the battle, I would have to tell people, like, look, I understand. I wouldn't know what to say to me either. And just on a daily basis of, I can't not bring up Tannen and whatever we're doing, whatever situation. And then suddenly I have to see the grief on that other person's face, and I'm trying to handle it, but here's just a random passerby. I mean, not that random, but, oh, I'm so sorry. And, just all of the things that come to mind when you hear of a person losing their child, they don't know what to say. And that's just sort of been a little extra thorn in it, is that I don't want to have to help you in this situation. Just say, I'm sorry. And let's get back on to talk about what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But when at the end of it,
no, go ahead.
We were exhausted all of our options and all of those things doctor tell us. And as soon as we made that public, how we were flooded with medicalmarijuanadoctors.com and sort of all of these, I'm not going to say medical marijuana is snake oil, but a lot of the things we were seeing was that snake oil sort of solutions. And that was sort of another dagger that it added to my guilt that, well, dang, maybe we didn't try everything. Maybe me listening to this doctor that is talking to every doctor in the country, maybe we should have been trying this homeopathic snake oils this whole time. And what did I do wrong as a father now as I'm looking at my child laying here?
Yeah, because I don't know about you guys, but I know I went through that same sort of guilt because my job is to take care of everything. As dad, I'm the guy who fixes things in my house. You got a problem, I'm the solution. Whether you want me or not, I am the solution. I'm the end of the problems. And, when your child is diagnosed with hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis, for some reason or other, I kind of felt like it was my job to fix it still. And even though the team of doctors, they flew a team of doctors across the country just to be able to diagnose it because they knew nothing about it. The team of doctors couldn't figure it out. I still felt guilty for not having saved my daughter. That was my job. Did you?
1,000%, Jason. Yeah. It took me, I still struggle with it to some degree, but better part of about 3.5, 4 years to this January, it'll be 5 years since we said goodbye to Brooke. And similar to both you, Ian and Jason, like you're the protector, you're the one that saw your child born. You're the one that held your child. You're the one that protects your child. And you do everything you possibly can to keep them healthy and safe. They skin a knee. You're there to fix anything. When Brooke was in the hospital, and and while we didn't have a team of doctors flying in from across the world, I actually put out like an APB out to all the different hospitals and doctors and reached out. I put stuff on the news. I put stuff on Facebook. I paid for ads. I did everything I possibly could. And we got a ton of information. Similar to Ian, what you were talking about, the medical marijuana. I even tried that. I ended up getting Rick Simpson oil and tried a little bit of that and see if that would work, right? And at one point in time, the doctors were all looking at themselves, and I pulled them all into a room. I say, listen, I want you to treat my daughter as she's your daughter, as she's your child. Find a way to save her. Several weeks after she passed, I am shooting myself. What did I miss? What did I forget? For 3.5, 4 years, I would not give up on giving myself that grace that I did everything I could. Because you're looking at it in hindsight. You're not looking at it from where you were. And that's what makes it hard. Because you know a different space now. But trust me, I guarantee you, all you guys did everything you possibly could because you're all great men.
Yeah, I know that as we all walk through that grief process, I think something that is a stigma that we all have felt and dealt with is that stigma of a man grieving, because we're not supposed to really do that much. You know, you're sad for 5 minutes and then you move on. But when you go through something like that, you don't get 5 minutes worth of grief. You know, you get a lifetime's worth of grief that you've hidden and stuffed away that suddenly wakes up, and you remit every bit of it comes back, and it just takes up residence in your body and in your soul for however long it needs. How have you guys walked through that grief process? Because people look at you funny. Now, I know this is a podcast, and so they can't really see us. But to be fair, when you see this face I've got over here, standing there in the middle of grief, looking like the big scary. I mean, I'm not a small guy, right? 6'1", 270 pounds, and this big shock of weird hair and a big black beard, and this guy standing there, and the wave of grief comes over you unexpectedly in the middle of a moment, and you're standing there, tears going down your face for no obvious reason. People look at you a little funny.
I think one of the troubles I've had, as I said, is as we've all said, is giving ourselves that time to grieve. And one of the things I've struggled with is identifying grief and guilt. Much like you're saying, Jason, in those moments, I immediately then feel guilty. You know, what am I looking like as I'm standing there next to my wife and my kids, and I'm not being that provider. I'm not being that face of the family and all of those other things. Even in terms of faith, my grief is very much masked by guilt right now, and that's.
Yeah, that's a tough spot, because I know, Mark, you have other siblings. I believe Ian said he did. Mike, do you have other kids still with you?
Yeah, I have a 15-year-old. So, yeah, 15 and a half. Sorry.
I know the struggle. You're hoping for 18 as soon as possible.
No, you got to count those 6 months.
Yeah. Just got his learner's permit. So if you live in Texas and Oklahoma, stay off the roads.
Hey, I have a daughter right now on a learner's permit, so add Missouri to that list. But, you know, and we have to help our kids through that. You know, and when we walk through it, my boys had just lost their sister, the girl they grew up with. And she was the oldest of the bunch. She was kind of the leader of the pack, really. When they were kind of lost, they didn't know how to handle it. And I had no idea how to help them through that. And I think I felt a lot of that same guilt you're talking about, Ian, you know, because I didn't know how to lead them through that. was
Yeah, but the kids, so my oldest is 6 now and was 4 at the time of Tannen's passing. And like I said, my expectations of him, how he should act, were one thing, but my goodness, in these past 2 years, just how that 6-year-old has taught me how to live, has taught me how to remember Tannen and how to be okay again. I mean, every night he prays and misses Tannen and things like that. And, oh, this yellow thing reminds me of him. But I think, yeah, just I've been blessed in that I can lean on the 6-year-old and that innocence and some peace.
That's a beautiful place to find some peace. How about you guys, Mike and Mark? How have you guys dealt with that with your other kids?
My oldest was refused to leave his brother's side, especially after we got the end of treatment scans when they found that spot. Pretty much up until the day he got his wings, he was the epitome of stubbornness. He was not going to be any further than a few minutes away from his younger brother. I think he understood the gravity of the situation from from the perspective of a 14-year-old. He was not a big talker, at least to me. He did talk to his bonus mom a lot about it. He still remembers him and he still loves him. As far as the way he processed his grief, I think it was the way that he needed to handle it, which was by himself in dealing, and him choosing to be by his brother's side basically the last 2 months was his way of preparing and also supporting his little brother as well. I mean, he didn't go to school. He did his work at home, and he set his foot in the sand and dug in his heels and said, this is my brother and this is what I need to do, not only for Ryland, but for himself as well. So I think he's grieved in a healthy way. And in one way, shape, form, or fashion, we were sort of blessed with the way that he's been able to handle it and deal with it and move on. I hate to say move on, but just deal with it in everyday life.
So for us, Brooke was the middle child, right? So she had an older brother. His name is Kyle, and a younger sister. Her name is Paige. During the process of her being sick and us visiting the hospital, both of them were there. More so Paige than Kyle, but we were also managing school at the same time. But whenever it was either Trisha or I, Trisha's my wife, and we would take turns being at the hospital, never leaving Brooke alone. The kids, we didn't realize it at the time, weren't really getting Trish and I. They were getting pretty much a body. They weren't getting a parent. They weren't getting their needs met. And we didn't realize this until several years later, after Brooke passed, through lots of therapy, just having these conversations. Now they come out and tell us that we had to grow up fast. Kyle was going through junior year, and all of a sudden Trish and I turned back to each other and like, oh my God, Kyle has to apply to colleges. And Kyle turns to us and says, I already did that. I'm like, oh my God, we missed that entire process. Because we were so involved in Brooke's care. Forget us. Our care went right out the window. It was Brooke's care, my wife's mother, who was sick in and out of the same hospital. They were attached to the children's hospital. And on top of everything else going on, right? And then we find out that, oh, well, my 10-year-old daughter had to grow up fast, and my 16-year-old, 17-year-old son had to grow up fast. And now they're in a much better space because now they're actually able to share. And especially Paige, she has no problem going into what she's lost, what she misses. She grieves a little bit easier now than I think she did back then. I think it was really more of a shock. It's a shock to us all. But it was very tough because we weren't really present. We weren't there for each other. So then there's that, right? There's the whole marriage aspect of things. Like, how do you get back to that after losing a child? It's like,
Great question.
where do you pick up? Oh my God. It was, we still every so often look at each other and like, what are we doing? But we're there for each other. That's the important thing. I was a little worried about that in the beginning.
Mark, you bring up a great point. The statistics don't stand up to give us all a lot of confidence on how we're going to come out of that. Families who lose a child, the percentages of those families that end in divorce are ridiculously high. You know, I don't know about the rest of you guys. My wife and I, we're still together and going strong, but we've walked through a lot of deep water together. You know, how did your marriage stand through that, or are you is there a secret you can kind of divulge to how you walk through it?
Well, we've been through a lot of shit before that even happened. And we were able to stand that. We stood by each other, made decisions together throughout the entire way, talking to each other. And don't be afraid to talk. Don't be afraid to cry uncontrollably. Like, I'll be honest, I'm an ugly goddamn crier, man. And when I let loose, forget it. It's listen, I cry at freaking Hallmark commercials. All right. It's just what it is. But at the same token, we both lean on each other. I cry on her. She cries on me. I yell, punch things. She gives me that space. That's why we have a punch bag. You know, whatever way you need to get it out, writing, talking, punching, running, whatever it is. For her, it's crying and talking, and giving her that space helps her feel heard, helps her feel like she has someone to rely on. So no secret sauce, no ancient Chinese secret though.
I've got the secret to this. They're about 5'6" tall, half Italian and half Cajun. With the stubbornness of a mule is what I was blessed with. So yeah, had it not been for Lexi, the gun was in the mouth and the trigger was pulled many times. So
yeah,
wow.
You're blessed.
Yeah,
blessed.
It's that rock is what you need.
Mm-hmm.
I think if I were to identify secret sauce, it would be grieve in two ways. I think my wife and I, we are still together, fortunately. I think we are coming out of some of the deep water, not to say not more is coming. But she is able to grieve in the way she wants to, and I support her in that way. And I'm allowed to grieve in the way that I want to, and she supports that. I think the one thing that we are currently working on is still finding time to grieve together, because this is going to affect us differently. But at the same time, that child is here because of her and I, and that's something we never forgot as a marriage. And I think this experience has, I don't want to speak for her, but it's caused me to be very selfish. And I'll support you in the way you want to grieve, honey, but when it's my turn, it's my turn. But never, hey, let's get together and write down our favorite story, or let's just watch videos together, which we do sometimes. But I think that's important, is allowing each other to grieve the way you want to grieve, but also making sure there's deliberate time to grieve together as a unit.
Absolutely. We didn't do that well mostly together, my wife and I, because like I mentioned, my father just passed, and then our daughter got sick, and life was stupid busy, and And then I had teenage kids in the house. I didn't feel like I had the bandwidth to grieve. And so I just shoved it all in a box. And it's taken me, the process of writing that chapter, really honestly, that took me, I don't know how long it took you guys to write a chapter, but it took me months because there would be weeks between sessions of sitting to write. I had to be in the right headspace. I had to take the time. I had to go back and put myself there in a place that I had put away in a box and intended to leave there forever. And I had to open that stupid box and dig that stuff out. And it was a real challenge. And to be honest, I'm going to bang the same drum I bang when I talk to everybody about this kind of stuff. Therapy is not for people who are weak or it's not for any wrong reasons that people talk bad about a therapist. There are bad therapists. And there are therapists that are bad for you. But if you find a good one, that's, as a matter of fact, earlier today, we sat and had our regular conversation with Dr. Tom. We do that once a month still. And it has been 8 years. It's been 8 years since Arissa passed. And we still hold some space on a monthly basis to do that, because some months we don't have a whole lot going on. It's not that much, not that heavy. Some months it's ridiculous what we still are dealing with. And I wanted to shift gears real quick. I have a slightly different question, because I don't know any of you guys' personal spiritual beliefs, but something that I've found that has been super interesting is the supernatural aspect of all this. Because after Arissa passed, we would go to a church here local. We weren't really connected with a church very deeply or anything, but it was one of the big mega church type places where I could sit in the back row, and when this big scary looking dude is sitting in the back row with two babies in car seats, and I can sit in the back shadows and just, it's the only place I felt like I could feel anything. I could sit in the back row and cry for an hour by myself, more or less. And it was interesting though, because we have a lot of kids, and the time, I forget exactly how old my little ones were, but they would come home and they'd say something like, "Daddy, I saw Arissa on the ceiling today at church. She was on the ceiling and smiling down, and she waved at me," and weird stuff like that. You're like, wait, you are too young to be just like, I think Turtle was maybe 2-3 years old at the time, and he's too young to be making this stuff up. He doesn't have any real influences in his life that I don't know about at that point, because he was home with us. And over the years, we have seen so many things that you just look back and go, that can't be coincidence. The other night, my wife woke up in the middle of the night, and you have to understand, she's a person with a lot of anxiety in her life, and she's been plagued from a difficult childhood with a lot of nightmares. She woke up the other night, and she said she woke up and she felt a hand touch her back, and the hand just ran down her back. And she knew it wasn't me, because I was a big lump laying beside her in bed. But she's like, I wasn't even scared. Like, it didn't make me jump. I knew it was her. And I don't know how. But have you guys had any experiences since having lost your child that you can only attribute to the supernatural, which is quite frankly unexplainable in my book?
I don't know what. It's funny you asked that, because I remember telling my wife people are going to think I'm crazy. So I don't know. I don't know if you want to call it an out of body experience, a dream. I don't know. It was something. And I remember, in a sense, leaving my body, floating up through the roof of our house, being able to look down and see myself laying there. Then in a fraction of a time, I am in, it's going to be hard to describe, but I'm in some place, and in the center of this place, there's this large glowing orb that's like gold, very sunnish, sun ray. There was a very golden hue to just the whole look of it. And where I was in this, we were slightly elevated. So as you look down sort of towards this glowing whatever it was, you could see down that this was just almost a spiral, and all of these roads led to this golden ball of energy. And you looked at the energy, or I did, and I knew immediately that it was safe and happiness and love. There was no negative, connotation towards it. And as I'm looking around and trying to understand exactly where I'm at, or like where I'm at and what's going on, here comes Ryland walking, sort of out of uh, what I would call like very tall, sort of flowy, wheat-looking grass. And he comes up to me. I pick him up, and he puts his head, a forehead against mine like he did so often. And instantly I knew that he was, or I felt that he was okay. And then the next sort of moment or fraction of time, he's walking towards this glowing orb, and I remember looking up and seeing people sort of floating down from the skies around and coming to this road and walking towards the center. I don't know everybody's spiritual beliefs. Certainly, I have my battles with God continually, to accepting, to hate, to anger, to frustration, and even now, I don't know what I saw. I know it wasn't a dream. There's just no way. And it's funny because generally I asked a minister about it, and I haven't really spoken to a whole lot of people about it because I didn't want people are going to think you're crazy because you're saying that you had an out of body type experience. And then I remember floating back down, and then the next minute I'm back in bed. So that's probably the closest thing I've had to anything like that.
Ian, has your Mark, either one of you had anything along those lines?
Fortunately or unfortunately, no, I have not. I no, I have not in it, and maybe I'm still young in this process, or I am very faithful. In a children's hospital, God is either really easy to see or really hard to see, depending on what you decide, I suppose. And maybe that's God telling me I need to live a good life so I can see Tannen again. But no, I have not had that moment just yet. Mike, after Mark, I don't want to cut you off, but Mike, I would be anxious to know, what were your feelings after that? Like when you woke up, was it peaceful, or was it more sadness of having to see him again?
Yeah, it was both. I mean, it was, there was a peace and stillness that I have not ever, and since I have not felt again. But also sadness, because to me, and since then, I have not had a dream about Ryland, and I am absolutely ashamed of myself for that. And I hate that. Yeah, and I hate that. So it was both. I don't. It affected me enough that I actually we have an artist trying to sort of recreate this image on a canvas.
Very good
for us. So it was a combination of both.
I have a lot of family that yellow was Tannen's favorite color, and so anytime they see a yellow butterfly or anything like that, we'll get a quick text message or, "Hey, I just saw Tannen today." And part of me is just, why haven't I seen the yellow butterfly? What am I doing wrong? But at the same time, literally everything makes me think of him. And so the fact that I don't have that one significant thing, maybe it's a good thing, maybe it isn't. But it's just interesting. Yeah. Go ahead, Mark. I'm sorry.
No, I'm glad you asked Mike about that, because I was curious too. And it's funny you're talking about dreams. So for the several years after Brooke passed, I didn't dream of her. And you mentioned being ashamed. I was angry. I'm like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I dream of my daughter? And I guess I just gave up on trying. Like, I would sit there and look at her photo before going to bed. And don't get me started with nights, because nights were always the worst, right? You're laying in bed, all those thoughts run through your head. You should have done this, should have done that. Life is awful. I want to die, and everything else that goes along with that. Maybe that's probably why I didn't dream of her, because I had all that baggage sitting there weighing on my head and my soul. And then out of nowhere, I guess I just gave up trying. And maybe it was because, now that I think about it, I mentioned before, it was about 3.5, 4 years that I finally had to forgive myself for everything happening. That's ironically when I started having dreams of her. And I'll remember this vividly, right? So one time I had a dream of her and us at a beach, and I could smell the ocean. I could see her clearly, but she was younger. So it was almost like a memory, but it wasn't at a beach that I'd ever been to or she'd ever been to. So I'm not sure where everything came from, but I remember waking up excited, happy that I saw her. I've never seen her in what I think she would look like now in a future state. I've always seen her as I remember her before she got sick. Because we all know our children's change when they're going through that cancer journey, right?
Oh yeah.
And it's so hard, because those are the last images on your mind. And you don't want to remember them like that. You want to remember them when they had all that life inside them, not when they're hooked up to a machine getting that poison put through their bodies, or like Brooke went through 47 days of constant whole brain radiation and seeing that mask on her head. I didn't want to have a dream like that. Unfortunately, I have never had a dream like that, because that wouldn't be a good one. But go back to your question, Jason, spiritually. So I was never a true, I guess what you quote unquote spiritual person. Do I believe in another entity? I believe that God is in me, as he's in many other people that believe. I believe in the power of prayer and self-reflection, which is, to me, all that prayer is. It's kind of like you're asking your inner self, which is where the Holy Spirit supposedly is. And I say supposedly because I don't know. But it feels better than not. It gives me a little bit of hope. And I've listened to lots of friends who have very strong spiritual natures. I don't believe in the whole, okay, I have to go to this particular church and follow this particular protocol to get that wafer and make me feel these things. That's not what I believe. I believe it's in my heart. And that's where I believe Brooke is too.
Mark, I can't disagree with that a bit. Ian, I know we're running a little short on time.
That's okay. I just got the nod for a couple more minutes.
I had one more question before we kind of put the landing gear down here, guys. What have you done as a way of memorializing, your child's passing or their life, and Ian, like I said, I know you're kind of running a little bit short on time, but I'm curious. What have you done that memorializes who they were?
So we are fortunate to have a little property, and we have a garden dedicated to them. I have an aunt. My wife's aunt built a bridge that runs across a little creek. I built a special bridge, or a bench. And now that we have some of these permanent structures in, wife and I have been having fun and plotting different flowers and things like that to be able to walk through, filled with wind chimes. And all of my kids are named after trees, and so we have all of the trees planted for them. Tannin, as in Tannenbaums, we have a few different styles of Christmas trees depending on what you like.
That's awesome. Mark, I know you had started a journey a while back.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to do the podcasting, and I'm certainly going to get back into it. Having this podcast with you guys has been reminding me how much I actually enjoy talking with other people that are going through similar journeys. So there was that. There was or is. I also started a TikTok journey where I'm sharing my experiences with grief and how the struggle, even though it's 5 years later, right? Doesn't make a difference. Grief is not linear. It doesn't know time. So with that, I'm going to be sharing, because tomorrow it would have been her 19th birthday. So it's her 19th heavenly birthday. For the next 19 days, I'm going to be sharing some of the great things about Brooke on that TikTok channel.
What's your handle there so people can find you?
This Man's Journey.
This Man's Journey. And if I remember right, the podcast was called Brooke's Light.
That's correct.
Hey, I'm getting old and I forget a lot of things, but I remembered something today. How about you, Mike?
Oh, don't give me a podium. So
I aspire to be Mike.
We started the Ryland Strong Network. TikTok is Ryland Strong Network. Facebook is Ryland Strong Network. RYLAN Strong, just like a human is strong, and the network. And the website's rylandstrongnetwork.org.com. I have an IT guy, kind of, sort of, that helped me buy all that. So yeah, we started the Ryland Strong Network. It was going to be a memorial for Ryland. But so as a father, and as a family, we also, or at least I recognized that without the network support of people that we had around us, there's no way we would have gotten through this. And I don't know, and I've said this in many times in other interviews, I owe a debt that I will never be able to pay back. And so I guess in some round way, form, or fashion, this is my way of trying to pay back that debt. So we started the Ryland Strong Network. It was built of it started with car and motorcycle guys that wanted and needed a reason to give, to give back. And you don't need to give these guys a reason to get together and show their cars and brag about their motorcycles. But when you do give them a good reason, they tend to get behind it. So, we have three main goals. We support families that are in financial need of assistance during their battles. The other one is sort of enacting, and it's more behind the scenes, so people don't see a whole lot of it, is enacting legislation, at least here in the state of Texas, that's going to require hospitals and insurances to work together, meaning they can't turn you away based on your insurance. They had told us, in fact, that when we were at the Children's Hospital in the DFW area, that it would have been better if we just didn't have insurance. They would have treated us. In fact, the morning they told us Ryland had cancer, or what they thought the type of cancer was, they asked me to write a $250,000 check for his treatment, knowing full well that we didn't have $250,000. The third one, in the place that I never envisioned us being in, and although I'm glad that we're able to help, I'll reference back that I seem to be sort of surrounded by death, is we found ourselves paying for funerals, and not everything in its entirety, because funerals are very expensive, but helping pay for caskets, helping these families that get to the end of this treatment that are so financially broken that they don't have the means in which even to buy something as simple as a casket, or they need help raising money for a funeral. None of these families asked to be there. And these battles are not only emotionally hard on these families, but financially it's a nightmare. We filed bankruptcy with Ryland's journey. That was the only thing that we could do. And so had it not been for the graciousness of some of these other families, and this network of people, we wouldn't have been able to do anything. And so over the last year, we've been fortunate enough, because we've been blessed with donations to the network, to turn around and either write families a check to help with the cost of some of these funerals, or have GoFundMe's where the money goes directly straight to the family. Like we never see it, in essence. We host it and start it, and then everything just goes directly to them. So our next big event is actually the end of August 26th. It's here in Dublin, Texas. It's our second annual car and motorcycle show, and it's where we get a lot of our funding to be able to help do that, to help these families throughout the year. So it's also been my way of grieving, in a sense, I would say, because I can't tell you how to grieve. I don't know how to grieve myself. So this has been the network was created because I don't think I could live with myself if I wasn't trying to give back to those that gave so much to us during our battle.
Yeah, man, I hear you there. Most of the people listening on this should know our story enough to know that we're a foster and adoptive family. And I know that my daughter, let's see, at the time when she passed, we had two little guys staying with us as fosters. And one of them is, I'm going to get really complicated here, my wife's half sister's little boy, right? And she's spent a lot of time struggling with addiction, and he was staying with us. He was in the foster system at that point. And I know that her dying wish that she told my wife was that she said, "Hey, take care of little man. Promise me that you'll do everything you can to take care of him." And that's the way that everything turned out. The whole point of foster care is to reunify kids with their parents whenever possible and healthy. And it didn't turn out that way for him. And he we sometime, I forget how long it was after that, but a few months later, we ended up being able to adopt him permanently, and he's now a permanent fixture here in our family. And that's been just one of our the way that we show the love that we have experienced is to bring in kids who need that. Because quite frankly, in all of our family and all of the extended stuff on both my wife's side and my side, there's a lot of kids who've suffered a lot through addiction, and we just, that's part of who we are. We make space for kids who need things. And that's kind of the real push behind all that journey, is that we have become someone who holds space for kids who need things. And I'm not going to pretend like that's an easy journey at all. Mike, I know you mentioned some of the struggles on trying to do the nonprofit stuff, and it's hard. But as we look back, I think we can all say that it's worth it.
Yep.
Well, guys, I appreciate you guys offering up some of your time tonight so we can talk about this a little bit. I don't know if I've mentioned the name of the book yet, but the name of the book is going to be The Last Hug. And The Last Kiss is the book that's already out. That's the one written by mothers. The Last Hug is the one that is written from the dad's perspective. So anybody who's interested in it, there will be a link in the show notes to the webpage where you can go ahead and pre-order the book now. It should be out, according to all the crazy back and forth between this company and that company and publishers and all the people involved. Between summertime and the holidays is the window we've been given when it will be out. And so if you want to go out and pre-order your copy now, you'll get it as soon as it comes out. You'll get that first shipment of books. It shows up, you will get one there. So the link will be down in the show notes, and you guys can go order that. So thanks a lot, guys, for sharing your stories, because this stuff is not easy for us to walk back through. I know.
It's gotten easier, but thank you very much for hosting this. And guys, so nice to see you guys.
Yeah, likewise. I will be counting this as one of the first steps in my grieving process. So I appreciate you three being here with me, and thanks for hosting.
Hey guys, I appreciate your time and your vulnerability. We'll talk to you guys soon.
Take care.
This